My name is Courtney Raymond, and I'm the marketing manager at OpenStax. And I'm joined by Aravind, who is the co-founder of Learner, which is one of OpenStax Allies. They offer a wonderful courseware that integrates the content, which we'll be telling you more about as we continue. We also have a panel of instructors who have used Learner and can give us specific best practices on ways that they have found it to enhance their teaching or been useful for their students. We always try to learn and hear from instructors who are actually using it in the field, so we can get real-time feedback on what's been most helpful. With that, I'm going to go ahead and in a second tell you a little bit more about OpenStax before passing things over to Aravind. Just so you guys know, you are all on mute right now because we have quite a few registrants today, but we do want to hear from you. So I would ask if you have any questions, there's a Q&A button as a part of your Zoom panel. So please go ahead and enter your questions there. And we are going to try to get to the questions as we can during, but then we're also going to have a considerable Q&A portion towards the end to address as many of those as we can as we hear from our panelists. So to go ahead and get started, I'm going to share my screen, tell you a little bit about OpenStax. All right. So for those who don't know, OpenStax is a publisher of open resources based at Rice University, which is a nonprofit. So we publish textbooks for the highest enrolled undergraduate courses. For the most part, we also have some high school books as well. They're available for no cost online. They go through the same peer review process and quality standards as traditional textbooks, but because of the open license, it means that instructors can remix, revise, redistribute them. You can put in your own material, you can omit some of it under that license. So basically you can use it however best fits the needs of your course. And I'm here today joined by Aravind from Learner, because Learner is a partner of ours. We call those OpenStax Allies. So we make the content, that's our specialty, but Learner offers a low-cost, high-value option if you want a learning platform in addition to the content for your course. And so our allies enrich our material and also provide financial support and in-kind support that helps to keep the books current and accessible to students. And they're an important part of our ecosystem of making this content available. We keep it up to date throughout at all times, so a student can always access that up-to-date material. They don't have to worry about it no longer being current or being out of whatever edition they're in. So they provide a lot of value in that way. And I'm going to now turn over presentation to Aravind to talk to you a bit more about that.
Hey, thanks, Courtney. Let me quickly jump to my slide deck. I hope all of you can see this. Yeah, there you go. So that's really the topic of the conversation and why you guys, thanks for joining, and this is why you're here. So let's quickly run through the agenda. We'll be talking a little bit about Learner, just spend probably 5 minutes about it. And then I'll then hand it over to the panelists, Dr. Lang, Dr. Villeral, and also Dr. Kumar, who are all working. Dr. Lang is from CUNY. She's the science program coordinator there. Dr. Villeral, she's from PVAMU. She's specifically going to talk about her large class sizes. She has 200 students per class, and she has 4 classes, and how she manages, her class, course, and students through Open Ed. And then Dr. Kumar, who is the A&P Labs coordinator at Truckee Meadows Community College, and we have partnered with her to build our A&P Labs as well. So who are we? So Learner is actually a garage project from Pearson. I used to be the head of innovation at Pearson a decade ago. And I quickly started to realize that the stuff that I was building was not accessible by most of the students who needed it the most. So I had to quit my cozy job. And then I came on this mission. I didn't realize how monumental this task was, to democratize the cost of course materials without compromising quality. So if you've used Pearson Mastering or A&P or My Math Lab. Those are all places where I've been I have architected those platforms. So something that you guys are familiar with. In terms of what we do, we have an adaptive learning platform, and we build personalized courseware, homework solutions, and classroom engagement tools that align exclusively to Open Ed. That doesn't mean we don't align to other, publisher textbooks, but I think our mission has kind of, given us a pathway that, hey, Open Ed is where everybody is going, and that's where it gives us the most price flexibility also to align the price to the market. So, having said that, some quick facts about Learner. Every single course that we build, again, it's all aligned to the OpenStax textbook at this point, and we can customize any course for you based on your pedagogy and syllabus. Our cost models, we have a per course cost model between $20 and $40, and we also have an inclusive access library model, which I'll speak to in a bit. We also provide, there's a give back program that we have where 5% of the sales proceeds is actually given as access to students who are financially struggling. And because we work with a lot of HBCUs and community colleges, we do see a lot of poor students. So we take a portion of the revenue and we provide free access to such students. We do integrate with a lot of different learning management systems in all the standard systems that are out there. So specifically with A&P, Anatomy and Physiology, we also enhanced the Anatomy and Physiology OpenStax textbook. We added 83 new topics. We also enhanced some of the existing topics as well. Apart from that, we were requested to kind of build a lab manual. So what we did was we actually built a completely new lab manual that, again, aligns with the same kind of a structure as the OpenStax textbook. So apart from just our homework solution, we also provide active engagement or live polling solutions. If you use Kahoot or Top Hat, all of that is embedded as a, it's all a single price point for students. So everything is kind of integrated into a single platform. You can also upload your lecture slides and embed activities. And all of our courses are ADA compliant. We pretty much use all HTML5 standards, except for the 3D model, which, if anybody's interested, we can talk to you about it. And we have excellent support from a customer service perspective. We are available 7 days a week. So please review a lot of the unfiltered reviews that instructors have given us on OpenStax to get some feedback. So in terms of the learner courses and pricing, these are all the courses we have, and we are still, there's dates available on when we are planning on releasing the other courses. It's $20 to $40 for each of these courses. And in the library model, that's the democratization aspect of it, where we want to charge only $80 for all courses per year for a student. So that way, we want to focus on innovate on building content. Predominantly we focus on formative assessment activities and so on, apart from just the technology. So we are building everything from the ground up and aligning it to the Open Ed text or Open Ed content. And students should not worry about, oh, how much am I going to pay for this course, right? So the $80 access for all courses allows us to keep innovating on courses while not putting a dent on students' financial assets. So having said this, let's quickly turn to Dr. Lang on why use OER.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aravant, and thank you all for joining us today. As it was already mentioned, I am a science program coordinator in one of the colleges at CUNY. CUNY is a huge university. But most of the concern that science professors have when it comes to open educational resource has to do with the quality. There's practical concerns about that for our classes and even the allied health and in the science majors. So of course, natural scientists like to just do research to just determine how potent OER material is. So myself and a couple of colleagues of mind decided to just do a very simple test as a very simple study to be able to sort of recognize the performance of our students when they use OER material versus non-OER content in our science classes. So basically what we did was that we decided to do this in our certain lab sessions. And we did this in a 2-year college in CUNY and another 4-year college in CUNY as well. And basically what we did was that we had 2 separate classes that we assigned one class as the class A was the open educational resource class, and class B was the non-open educational resource class. And what we did was that specific topics, we gave the class A OER content, and then for class B, they use traditional textbooks, the non-OER content. Now, this is what we saw, as you can see in the graph that you are viewing right now, that for the 2-year college, there was no statistical significance between the performance of the students who were in the OER class at the 2-year college versus the 4-year college. But then when we looked at the 4-year college, what we saw, which was quite interesting, was that the students in class A, which is the open educational resource class, did better than the students in the non-OER class. And that was quite a finding. And I personally did not expect that. Of course, we had to put a control in place where we gave non-OER questions, content questions to both class A and class B in both colleges, and there was no statistical significance. So in analyzing the data, one of the discussions and conclusion we came up with was the fact that there could have been an instructional bias in terms of the content delivery being narrowed down to the OER content, because we were able to, using Learner, we were able to customize the content in a way that we were able to focus the information to the students in the way that we wanted the students to have it. Certain population of our students are first language learners. They are first generation students. We were able to have that liberty to navigate the OER material in that way. So that is a good thing, but that could have played a part in allowing the students to do better. One of the things that we also were able to think and discuss as we were looking at these results was the fact that we were able, certain areas, we were able to elaborate the information better, because again, there was that customization piece that was connected to the OER versus the non-OER. So what we decided to do was to go ahead and work towards having some of our courses in OER, and of course have the textbooks as copies for students to use for reference purposes. And we are still working in that area with several other courses in my college. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lang. And off to Dr. Villeral.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give you a little bit more information just from a personal standpoint. I fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to think about, inherited a class at PVAMU, where I'm at right now, that was set as a core curriculum course originally. I came to Prairie View with the mindset that I was going to be teaching the nursing students A&P. Yes, I was so excited. And then unfortunately for our department, we had a death, and I stepped into the role of trying to curate a core curriculum class and the textbook transformation initiative that was started at our university. So at first thought, it was a little bit daunting of how do I corral 800 students in one semester using open educational resources? Can it be done? Is there enough resources available to do that? And what I quickly found is absolutely, like the fear of, oh, there's no set types of information readily available quickly went out the window when I ran into OpenStax. OpenStax has just been amazing. So they have a plethora of different textbooks that you can use. There are some supplemental materials, but what else can we use? So when thinking about how to keep the student engaged in the material, we have to start with the fundamentals of just online or digital learning, because that's the kind of environment that we're in. So my first thing was to, one, how do I get the student to stop with the I already know kind of concept and increase their growth mindset, the ability to want to learn and to learn. Then using OER, is there enough variety of content that I can capture a large array of learners? Because not everyone is going to learn the way that I teach. And unfortunately for the students, I tell them all the time, I'm the only one that teaches that here. So I'm going to adapt my style, but you also need to adapt your style. And then how do I build a community in a digital format? And then can I give the student the ability to choose and give them a variety of choices of types of learning materials that were necessarily needed. So those are my 4 big motivations on how to correctly incorporate OER into my course. So during the spring, we all know before the pandemic, I had spent a year developing core curriculum information that I could incorporate. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits, and now I have to set my mind from doing a face-to-face to just this digital types. So with Learner and with OpenStax, I was so delighted to find that they overlapped, that the Learner platform overlapped with all the information that I was already gathering and aggregating. And not only did the Learner overlap, and not only did, there come cartridges that I can build into my learning management systems, but they both did the same thing. But more singular to all of that for the success of the students is to create that single experience. When a student doesn't have to log on to multiple different types of accounts, if I'm not here in our Canvas or Blackboard, and then I have to send you to the publisher's particular website to do the activities, can I aggregate all of that in one place? And that is just the beauty of Learner. And then the last thing is to create that engagement, because anytime you want to engage a student, it is for the sole purpose of actual retention. How do I get the student to retain the information? And that comes with the online discussions. And what I found, especially this semester, was that meaningful online discussions, having those breakout sessions, but also having the ability to create the live polls and to show the students directly from the Learner platform what I was talking about, so that they got the personal experience, the community experience, all at one time. And what I found is that when we bridge and have an open mind to, one, being creative and using the resources that are available, 2, what is going to really allow the student to get the educational equity that our university was trying to give to them with the textbook transformation. And plus the 2, Learner plus OpenStax, can equal success. And what I will say is that there are plenty of activities, there are diversity in the types of activities that we can give to the students. But what I like most is that with some of the wonderful images that are embedded into the Learner, you can build and create your own types of case studies. And you'll hear a little bit more about how those are used in some of the actual laboratories and some of the other panelists. So I'm just going to give you my personal kind of, you can do it with the support. And if you can eliminate the idea that aggregating all of these resources is time consuming and maybe a little bit more difficult, there are tons of resources available to you to kind of supplement those students. We've all had the student that couldn't afford the information. And that's the number one thing, is I tell the students, information is the most valuable thing that you can attain. So having these platforms that kind of give you the equity and getting the information you need to succeed is important to the success of the student.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Villeral. So let's actually move on to the actual topic of this webinar. Some of the best practices, especially in this online world, and also, once, post-COVID, how can we use some of the best practices in histology, using 3D models, using physical models, in this case, physical models as images, cadavers, and virtual labs. So I'll invite Dr. Kumar to start with histology. Dr. Kumar?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Archana, and I'm an AMP instructor and AMP lab coordinator at TMCC. And so just a little bit of background on how I fell into Learner. We were shifting into online learning when the pandemic hit, and we needed to provide additional resources to our students. And so Learner had partnered with TMCC and to take pictures of our physical models in the lab. And so that's kind of how I fell into the lap of Learner. So if we talk about histology, histology is the study of tissue, how it works, how is it structured. So I use histology images to instruct my students when I teach them the different type of tissues, epithelial, muscular, nervous. And so these tissues are fundamental in understanding functions and location and how the body works. But students do struggle just looking at images in the classroom, right? We don't want to just teach them words. We don't want to just say, oh, it's located here, this is the function, but we want to show it to them. So one aspect of using the histology images that Learner offers, and Learner offers a variety of them, is I use the histology images to create my lab exams. Students are not in the classroom, so they're not physically working with a microscope, or they're not taking pictures using their microscope. So using the existing content from Learner with the histology image has given me that opportunity to bring the in-lab content to online learning. I also use the histology images to help students detect what normal tissue looks like and what abnormal tissue looks like. And I incorporate this into my clinical case activities that I use in the classroom and in online. And so students are able to distinguish between these two, and it relates it back to the real world and something they may experience when they become clinicians. So Learner does enable me to use those existing histological images with different magnification in my lab exams, in my case studies. So again, instead of students going in and taking pictures from their microscope, they have easy access to it already online, and they can study at any time they wish to do. 3D models. So I also use 3D models. 3D models are three-dimensional interactive images or models that provides different perception of depth. So I don't have 3D models access to my classroom, and maybe many other universities or community college don't. So the great thing here was, instead of physical models, instead of just microscopes, gaining access to 3D models was difficult. So having those images available online gave me the opportunity to teach my students the intricacy of tissues and organs from different views. It's quite difficult to do that sometimes with just physical models, but having that capacity to actually see that organ or that tissue in different views allows students to correlate these anatomical structures. And it also teaches students visual spatial ability, right? Correlate structure, organ, function. And so Learner contributes because it offers a variety of 3D models, and these 3D models correlate to existing physical models. So again, this gives students an opportunity to look at them side by side as well and be able to distinguish and recognize the differences compared to a physical model. And finally, physical models, it's a convenient method that many of us probably use in our classroom. It's an object, it comes in various sizes, it has movable parts. And so I do use physical models in my classroom every day in my lab because it is easy access. And so my students have the capacity to come into the classroom anytime they want. Now, shifting online, it was a little bit difficult to do that. So having the capacity, again, to use the physical models online gave me an opportunity to do exactly what I do in my lab. I test students, I label, I ask open-ended questions on those physical models, I intercorrelate structure and function. And so having that physical model images already ready for me makes it much more easier. It saved my time from going into the lab, taking a picture of those models, uploading them, cropping them. So that was a process in itself. And so having already these pre-made physical model images, I could just use them on in my own lab exams. And so again, Learner contributes that by, again, bridging the gap between what I would do in my in-person class and online. And so students are able to practice using these models, and they don't have to sneak home, right? Some of them take it home, hide it in their bag of vertebrae, and go home and study or take images. It's already ready for them here online, and they have access to it anytime and anywhere. And Learner offers that.
Thank you. And yeah, Dr. Villeral.
Yes, so also one of the wonderful aspects about Learner are the cadaver images. This is probably the highlight of putting all of your pieces together as an undergraduate. Not a lot of undergraduate institutions have access to human cadavers. We fortunately at PVAMU do have one cadaver in the lab, but only 4 students at a time. And when you have 16 sections of A&P just for nursing, you can't get everyone the opportunity to see it. But when we have the opportunity to give the student actual cadaver images so that they're able to recognize that some of those images and the tissue dissections and things that they've done on animals or things that have been dyed are not what happens in professional school. I'm coming from a background where I'm a healthcare professional by trade. Yes, I am. I've had a lot of different types of jobs, but this is the most exciting thing for the students. It has always been the most exciting thing for students when we could take them on field trips to different medical schools so that they could get an opportunity to observe a cadaver or dissection. This gives the student kind of that feel and opportunity to see the layers of not just the 3D models, because we also have those, but we only have 3 tables and there's only 1 class per semester that gives the students the opportunity to play with our 3D model dissection tables in our gross anatomy class. So again, this is an opportunity to give the experience to more students. And that is kind of what is really reinforcing the idea of being engaged. When you can give a student an opportunity to experience just a little bit about what their dream is, and most of our students who are in anatomy, particularly have dreams of becoming healthcare providers. So giving that experience early sets the expectation for continued engagement throughout their matriculation. And in Learner, you can also use all of the regular tissues. They give you the side-by-side 3D models and your cadaver images. So that gives the student real life context about what does it really look like underneath without the dye, without the models and the arrows pointing. I can't tell you how many times I've had a student come and say, hey, on the heart, can you tell me what this is? Because it's just a gray tissue. I thought it was gonna have, blue. I thought it was gonna be red. And I'm like, no, that's the dye that we're using to help you learn. But now we've got to take your learning from just a rote type of memorization to actual integrating it to what you normally would see in any real case. And that's a beauty of what the cadaver images offered in Learner, and it supports the A&P OpenStax books. So this is just another kind of way to give students another level of learning.
Thank you.
Okay, so when the COVID, we are still in COVID, right? But when we had to have the shutdown and all classes, and again, as you can see, most colleges had to have remote classes, and some colleges, even within CUNY, is still remote, and we had to teach our science students lab. That was a very difficult task. I was asked to be the faculty lead in our science department, to determine ways in which we could augment the lab activities for students to do remote labs, which was close to impossible. Now, I'm not giving this presentation to give the assumption that this is a replacement to in-person lab, no way. But we did a lot of search. We had faculty members in the team. We had inter-college Excel sheet grouping to just look for resources, curate them from anywhere possible. There were huge organizations that had all these lab simulations, but for some reason, we were not able to bring out that learning outcome in an effective way to help the students. And some of it was, of course, overpriced. So in all of this search, we again were able to connect with Learner for them to customize and put together labs that were effective to help support our students in a very effective, tangible way. We were able to have storyboards that were able to let students sort of read, understand, click on elements of this whole process. There were lab simulations that were able to sort of augment what they would see in real labs. And although we are going back in person, what these virtual labs are going to do is to actually reinforce the concepts and allow students to actually do all of these activities pre and post lab, in-person lab time. This is actually an important part where students can learn how to use microscopes before they actually touch the microscopes. Almost every year, and not every year, every semester, we spend so much money repairing or replacing our microscopes. This actually can reduce a lot of lab material waste. And the way that these labs are customized and the simulations have been put together allows the students to actually learn step by step and understand the lesson and understand the concept and understand the real process of doing the lab activities as a whole. So it's been a very resourceful time. There wasn't enough funding, and we were able to get this at a low cost to the school because we did benchmarking to check different prices with other companies, and it's no cost to students because of the adaptation that a kind of library model that we were able to adapt to help the students have access to these virtual labs at no cost to them. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, thanks a lot for the panelists. We have tons of testimonials. I would invite you to go on OpenStax and see what, because this is specific to anatomy and physiology, you could look at testimonials of instructors that have been using us for last semester or for the last 3 years to just get more insight into how they've been using Learner and how we've been able to help their students and also help them with their instructional needs. So let's open up for Q&A. And Dr. Villeral, if you want to take over at this point, I'll try to be the moderator and try to see what are all the questions that...
Actually, and before we jump in, I actually had one to direct to you, Aravind, if you don't mind, because there were a few questions coming in on this similar topic. So we had some people asking about the 3D models and cadaver images, what the internet capacity requirements are. For example, if a student doesn't have high-speed internet access, or if a student is in a country with less than ideal internet connectivity or bandwidth, just asking what is the requirement for those to run, and if they also work on mobile and tablet.
Yeah, great question. So the models that we have are, we are a partner of Zygote Body. So Zygote Body was a Google Labs spinoff. So they have worked on updating their models in WebGL. So they're pretty lightweight, if you will. You can still, I don't know which country you're talking about, because I think a lot of our tech team is in India, and they're able to access these models both on their smartphones or, obviously not their feature phones, because 3D models won't work on a feature phone. But your traditional requirement would be a browser, any kind of a Safari or WebKit-based browser like Chrome or Firefox. And you need to have some decent internet, maybe like a 1 Mbps or internet speeds. So with that, I think you should be able to download these models. And once you have downloaded the model, it doesn't re-download it every time for doing an activity. We typically go download the model once, and then students do a bunch of activities with that before they get to the next one. So most of them will be cached in the browser. Hope that answers your question. Dr. Villeral, do you want to just take over? Okay. Now let me just see. So I think you have a question. I think there's a question for you, Courtney. There's great resources all around. Curious how were all the illustrations in the OpenStax A&P developed? Is it hiring, collaborating with medical scientific illustrators? What's the agreement for usage and credit?
So I actually have a question. I saw that question and have it in our intra-office communications channel right now to get you a more specific answer. Generally, I can tell you that all of our content is openly licensed, including the illustrations. And the way that we do that for our books overall is that we hire subject matter experts, both for content writing and for the art. And whereas many textbooks pay with like on a royalty basis, since our books are accessible for free, we do a higher lump sum payment in the beginning. And then the content creators agree to have that content be available openly. And so that applies to the content as well. And our content team is working on a more detailed response for me, really more specifically to the particular illustrations in A&P. So I can follow up with you in the Q&A section with those specifics once I get those in.
Awesome. Yeah, so there's another question about what are the strategies used by faculty to encourage students to master the course versus taking shortcuts? So I would say that, any of the panelists can answer the question.
What I use are the active learning polls. Probably the majority. I did my class synchronous, but I've also done my class asynchronous. And I find that more students in the asynchronous environment try and do the shortcut. But what I have found with Learner is that it's an adaptive learning. Like most of the activities, they are adaptive to the students. So every shortcut they take deducts the points. And when the students recognize that they are giving away their A because they're clicking like automatically, they want the hints or they want to bypass things, they start to observe really quickly, like I might want to take this a little bit more serious. And I like that part is that it is adaptive. If the student gets it wrong, it does give them feedback. And then it tries to encourage getting the correct answer. So the more activities you do inside of Learner, where students are starting to get the habit that just taking a shortcut does reduce their overall score, I just find that students kind of take it a little bit more serious when there's more work to do. So for every single lecture, I give an activity of some point value in the learner just to kind of solidify, did they hear me? Did they see me? And can they apply the knowledge? So that's probably the best technique, is to just inundate them with what they call busy work. But yeah.
I will add to that. One of the things that I love about Learner is the quality of the questions. The questions are worded in such a way that students cannot just put it in Google and just find an answer. Even if it's not necessarily knowledge-based, if it's going to ask about a part, it will embed it in a story form that would not allow for the students to sort of cheat, so to speak. When you set the exams, it automatically will scramble it in a way that students cannot WhatsApp each other and say, what's the answer to question one? Because each person's question one is going to be different, although they will have the same pool of questions. One of the other things that I will echo from what my colleague just said is giving activities during lecture time, also to maintain the focus of the class and this whole easy way of doing things. You put you can set exams on Learner or test activities, homework, pre-quizzes, whichever way you want to name it, and they have it on there. So during a lecture period, I would say, okay, log into your Learner, I make it available to them, and then they start working on it with a timed, with a specific time limit. And so they are forced to sort of engage in the lecture time when it's a 3-hour lecture, 2 hour and 50 minutes lecture time. So it's just a really good way of knowing that your students are actually engaged in the learning process. Again, I would say that what just happened with regards to COVID and the remote sessions that we had, I was actually surprised when I did compare my grades with other instructors that were sort of had this, some of the students were in class and other students were remote, and they had their grades were imbalanced. Those that were remote had higher grades compared to those that were in person. And so it wasn't really a balanced, fair process. And so anyway, it just, so the next semester I was asked to just teach a specific, this is another institution, a neighboring institution outside of CUNY. So I was asked to just teach the remote classes alone, the lab part, and the midterm average, my average for my students, not to say I don't want my students to do well, but it was lower than the average that they had for the other classes. And my colleagues were wondering how I was able to get such fair distribution of grades, because I actually was using Learner and it was helpful that way.
Great, thank you. So there's a quick question on, does it integrate with Desire to Learn? Yes, it does. We integrate with all the major LMSs. So we have both single sign-on and gradebook sync, and we can automate those. With Canvas, we also can deep link your assignments so that students can simply go to the assignments module and click on an assignment and then take their assignment from the LMS. So we not only automate submissions, we also allow collaboration. That means if one instructor actually creates a template, then they can share that assignment template with other instructors. And assignment building or test building on Learner is super easy. It's very prescriptive. And even though there's a lot of information, a lot of resources, you can pretty much preview everything as you're building the assignment. So we don't want to burden the instructors, faculty typically, to go to 10 different, features, links and so on inside Learner and try to learn that. What we do is we make it very prescriptive, and we also onboard you on how to do it. And we have a YouTube channel. We're available 7 days a week in terms of support. So you have a lot of support in adopting Learner. Sarah, if you want to, Sarah Khalifa, she has a question. If you want to basically talk outside, I think we'll be more than happy to kind of accommodate your needs, and we can probably reach out to you. I'm going to put the link if any one of you wants to just schedule a demo with us. So this is not to the panelists. I think I have to send it to panelists and attendees.
Aravind,
yep.
There is a question that I was attempting to answer by typing, but it had to do with an instructor was asking that they have A&P for 2 semesters. So how will pricing look like? Is there a way they can negotiate pricing?
That's the one I was, that's Sarah, Dr. Lang, that is Sarah, and I already responded to her.
Got it.
I think there's some more questions here that please remind me once again. I'm unsure. The textbook is free and the access to 3D models, cadaver images. So, so Dr. Phyllis, the response is that the OpenStax text is always obviously open. What we've done is we have created an integrated experience with an enhanced textbook with embedded 3D models in it. Then we have a homework solution. So imagine that to be like your Pearson mastering. And then we also have an active polling solution. All of this is a single piece. It all works very nicely with each other. And that is what you're paying, or your student is paying either $20 or $40, depending on whether you want a lab or a lecture. Hope that answers your question. So it's just not access to the 3D models of the cadaver images, it's the entire homework solution. So if you want to switch from a mastering along with an e-text and also a polling solution, instead of all that, you just use Learner and you have access to all of this in a seamless environment.
I wanted to add something. I know most institutions, including ones that I'm affiliated with, have an assigned textbook, because again, not all institutions have fully embraced open educational resources as their assigned textbook. And students get worried in terms of transfer, how that may play into, and as a science program coordinator, I get worried about that. How will that play into other schools wanting to know which textbook did you use for this course? So that being said, one of the things that other schools that I've been affiliated with, we've done is that there is the textbook that is assigned to the class. And we make sure that students are aware of that, but we make sure that we don't we just put any edition because they can get older editions for a less expensive price amount, and that can compensate. For example, there's a textbook that I use, the first edition. It has 3 editions. And I use the first one, and students can get it for $40, $30 used copies, and it's less expensive, and I'm able to also continue using Learner in that price range that is always below $100 or even $80 for the students if they need to have access to Learner and the school is not doing the library model at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple more questions. I mean, actually, there's a couple more questions that I'm actually going back as I'm getting more questions. So one is, what testing software does this work with? We use Respondus Lockdown Browser. With Learner, you don't have to use Respondus, so you don't have to buy that, because we do have a testing capability where Learner is on a lockdown. I mean, we have seen even Respondus being broken, so or Proctorio being broken. So with Learner, we do have a testing capability where Learner is a complete lockdown, and we have various capabilities. So if you're interested, we could definitely talk about that offline. And I'll definitely try to reach out to you, Erica. And I think Dr. Chia, Dr. Lin, actually, she's asking about some simulated online lab sessions available with the platform, such as effects of hormones on heart rate. Could you please briefly introduce if there are? We currently only have 22 lab simulations, and we are building 12 more to align to the CUNY Hostos grant. But as we get more requests of building more such experiments, we are going to expand into both A&P and Gen Bio. So please feel free again to schedule a demo or a session with us. I've already put the link in the chat for you to learn more about it.
There is a question about differences for medicine or nurse, biology, and other courses. There's certainly the different levels with Learner. You want to talk more about that, Aravind, the other platforms you carry?
So the great question, Dr. Helena. I think that, again, think about Learner as a database. So even though we completely align with OpenStax, we can pretty much build a course based on your learning objectives. So if there's a specific syllabus, we can mix and match, multiple units topics from the OpenStax text, and then build that custom course for you. And all the formative assessment items, the activities that we have built from the ground up aligns to your course. So that, that way, you're not getting something that you're trying to adapt to, but we are trying to adapt. We're trying to build a custom course for you, again, depending on the level that you're at. What makes Learner different from Pearson Mastering? I think it's just the price point. By the way, so Pearson has some amazing illustrations, right? And we spent millions of dollars when I was at Pearson building some of these illustrations. Now, if those illustrations are really absolutely quintessential, then mastering definitely has an upper hand over open ed. But we are slowly bridging that gap. We're trying to catch up, right? We're trying to build those without having to change the price points. But yeah, 2 years from now, maybe we'll actually be a lot better. But when it comes to the questions themselves and the overall experience, I would say that Learner is much better than Mastering, because Mastering was built 15 years ago. And
can I just add, I'm sorry, being that I teach so many and I see every type of student, scrupulous and unscrupulous, and academic integrity is important. What I have found is that most of the larger publishers and different mastering types I've used everything I've worked at probably like 6 institutions. Learner is by far the most not used and researched from the students. They tell me that it's too hard to find the answers. It's too hard to cheat. Socratic never finds it. There are Quizlets never have the answers. So if you're looking for like an academic integrity experience, I can pretty much say 100% that Learner is going to give you the best, because of the fact that it is a newer system. And like he said, when you're using information from 15 years ago, it becomes study guides for you the next class tomorrow. So just put that out there.
Yeah, and I actually had mentioned that when I was presenting, that the wording of the questions, the way they've been worded, is not something that can be easily put into Google to allow searchers to connect the dots. So it makes it really, and again, my averages, not to say that I do not want my students to excel and do better. I wish they had up higher averages compared to my colleagues, but it was interesting to know that my students were just follow the dumbbell, just like if we meet in person during this remote season, when the grades were inflated in a lot of my colleagues' classes because they couldn't figure out how to deal with the academic integrity issue. But yeah.
Yeah, and one more thing to add to Dr. Lang is that we do keep updating and refreshing our questions depending on how much we find on Course Hero or Chegg or Quizlet. And one of the nice things about Learner is because of the way that our formative assessment engine is built, we are bringing the student to the correct answer. So the motivation to actually get out of Learner, take a screenshot, put it somewhere else and get the answer, it kind of is moot. So there's some best practices in assessment, informative assessment, that I could share with you. If you want to talk to me one-on-one, where you will see that, if you take a demo, you'll notice that if you actually give them multiple attempts where we have an adaptive quiz, the students don't know that it's an adaptive quiz. They simply think that's a static quiz and they're taking the quiz. So they try to get it right. Even though they get it wrong the first time, they're given the right answers right then with all the remedial content. So they think that the second time when they take the quiz, hopefully they'll kind of ace the quiz, but they don't. But they're also getting a lot of space practice. So, that's one way. And then with all the experiments, we have storyboards built in so that no two students get the same values. Like, whatever Dr. Lang was showing you about some of the iodine tests and all these tests, the test tube values are different, the scenarios are different. So no two students actually get the same scenarios or values. So they can't simply sit next to each other and try to start copying.